There are few experiences in life that pierce the human soul as deeply as the loss of a loved one. It is an encounter with absence, a sudden silence where once there was laughter, a chair left empty at the table, a voice we search for in the corridors of memory but can no longer hear. Grief is not simply an emotion. It is an initiation into a deeper dimension of life, a confrontation with the fragility of our existence, and yet, paradoxically, a doorway to growth, to meaning, and to a profound reshaping of the soul. The journey of coping with loss is not about erasing the pain, but about learning to carry it in a way that transforms us. Today, I will share with you 5 essential truths that can guide us through this path, 5 lights that, even in the darkest night of sorrow, can remind us that healing is possible. When we lose someone we love, the mind resists. It clings to fragments of what was, the sound of a familiar voice, the memory of a final embrace, the unfinished conversations that echo in silence. The heart whispers, if only, as though sheer longing might rewrite reality. Yet no force of will, no wishful thought, can undo what has already unfolded. The first step in healing is to accept the reality of loss, not as an abstract idea, but as something that penetrates deeply into the core of our being. And this acceptance is perhaps the most difficult of all, for it requires us to confront the raw truth that life has changed forever, and that no act of denial can restore what has been taken. The mind, in its desperate attempt to protect us, often creates illusions. It convinces us that the departed is only temporarily absent, that perhaps one day the phone will ring and we will hear their voice again. This illusion, while comforting, is a prison. It chains us to the past and prevents us from living in the present. Healing begins only when we dare to open our eyes fully and see things as they are. It is like standing in a cold, harsh wind. You cannot escape its sting, but in facing it directly, you begin to discover your own strength. I recall the story of a mother who lost her child. For years she kept the child's room untouched, as though preserving the sacred space might somehow hold the essence of her daughter within it. She tiptoed past the door, unable to disturb the silence, clinging to the belief that this shrine of memory would bridge the gap between presence and absence. Yet the room became a symbol not of connection, but of her refusal to face reality. Only when she found the courage to enter, to sit upon the bed and let the silence speak to her, did she begin the long journey of grief. In that quiet confrontation she wept for hours, not because she had forgotten her child, but because she had finally admitted to herself that her daughter was gone, and strangely, within that painful acknowledgment, she found the first fragile thread of healing. The denial she carried had numbed her heart, but the acceptance of absence opened the way for memory to become a source of love rather than torment. This is what acceptance truly means. It is not a betrayal of love, nor is it an erasure of memory. It is the brave act of saying, "This is my reality, and I will face it without turning away." It is recognizing that the person you love has crossed a threshold that you cannot follow, at least not yet. It is allowing yourself to live with the absence, to carry the wound without pretending it does not exist. Only in this honesty does the soul begin to heal, yet we must not mistake acceptance for forgetting. Forgetting is impossible, and it would be unworthy of the bond we shared. Acceptance is not the fading of love, but its transformation. It is the act of holding the memory in your heart, while releasing the illusion that the past can return. It is the difference between carrying a stone in your pocket and dragging a chain behind you. One weighs on you, the other accompanies you. Acceptance allows love to remain, not as a ghost that haunts, but as a quiet presence that guides. We see this truth reflected again and again in the stories of those who have endured great loss. There is the widower who sets an extra chair at the table each year on his anniversary, not in denial, but in reverent recognition that the bond still lives in memory. There is the father who plants a tree in the name of his son, watching it grow year after year as a symbol of life continuing, not erasing what was lost, but acknowledging its lasting influence. These acts are rooted in acceptance, in facing the absence without pretending it is not there, and in allowing the love to remain as a source of meaning. The danger of resisting this acceptance is that we wander endlessly in a shadow world of longing. When we deny loss, we live in a half-reality. The present becomes muted. Life around us fades into grey, because we are not truly here. We are trapped in a world of if-only. How many people have you seen who carry grief for decades, not because the love was too deep to ever heal, but because they refused to accept what was real? They live not with the memory of their loved one, but with the refusal to acknowledge their absence. And in doing so, they lose not only the past, but also the present. Acceptance is an initiation. It is like being cast into darkness and learning to see with new eyes. In the moment of deepest grief, we feel as though the world has ended, but slowly, when we face the truth, we discover that life, though changed, continues. And with that continuation comes the opportunity to transform grief into a deeper form of love. The pain becomes a reminder of the value of life, of the fragility of every connection, of the urgency to live authentically with those who remain. Think of it this way: when you accept loss, you honor not only the one who has passed, but also yourself. You refuse to live in illusion. You say, "I will not deny reality because I have the strength to face it." This strength does not come all at once. At first, it feels unbearable. Acceptance may arrive in small fragments: an empty chair noticed at breakfast, a silence in the evening, the realization that a familiar habit no longer fills the space it once did. Each recognition cuts like a knife, yet each one carves a deeper space for healing. The heart does not grow smaller through grief. It grows larger, capable of holding both pain and love simultaneously. What begins as raw suffering slowly transforms into a quiet reverence. The wound remains, but it no longer festers. It becomes a scar that tells a story, not of defeat, but of endurance, of love strong enough to survive even death. That is the paradox of acceptance. In facing loss fully, we do not lose the person entirely. We lose their physical presence, yes, but their essence remains woven into the very fabric of who we are. To accept is to let go of the futile struggle against reality. It is to surrender not in despair but in trust, that life, in all its mystery, still holds meaning even in the face of death. And though the road is long, and the nights are often heavy with sorrow, this acceptance is the first step toward walking with grief as a companion rather than as a captor. Grief is one of the most profound experiences we are ever called to endure, and yet, paradoxically, it is one of the most misunderstood. We live in a culture that glorifies composure, that prizes the image of strength as the absence of visible suffering. From a young age, many of us are told not to cry, to keep our voices steady, to hold back the flood of emotions that rise within us when life pierces us with pain. But grief does not obey these rules of social decorum. It comes uninvited, breaking into our lives like a storm, demanding to be felt. It is not weakness, nor is it a sign of fragility. Grief is love transformed into sorrow, the evidence of a bond so deep that it cannot be severed even by death. To deny grief is to deny the very depth of the love we once shared. Yet so many do deny it. They suppress their tears, they smile politely when asked how they are. They hide behind routines and distractions, believing that avoidance will protect them from the intensity of their suffering. But what is buried alive does not die. Suppressed grief festers in the shadows of the psyche, manifesting later as anxiety, depression, or a numbing emptiness that steals the color from life. It is as though we try to seal a wound without cleaning it. The infection spreads silently until it consumes us. True healing comes only when we allow ourselves to feel grief in its rawest form, when we let the tears fall, when we permit the body to tremble under the weight of sorrow, when we give voice to the rage, the confusion, the unbearable longing that wells up inside us. The tears you shed are not signs of defeat. They are a natural language of the soul, a cleansing flood that washes through the heart. Think of them as rain falling on parched soil. Without them, the ground of your inner life cracks and hardens. With them, new life, though fragile, begins to take root. This is why grief must not be silenced. It must be given space to express itself, not just in private whispers, but in the openness of our relationships, in safe places where our vulnerability is met with compassion rather than judgment. Psychologists who study grief have long observed that those who give themselves permission to mourn openly fare far better in the long run than those who attempt to suppress their pain. One study revealed that individuals who embraced their grief through crying, speaking, ritual, or other forms of emotional expression were far less likely to develop prolonged trauma or deep psychological distress than those who denied or numbed themselves. This is not merely theory, it is lived reality. When you look into the eyes of someone who has allowed grief to pass through them, you see not only sorrow, but also a strange kind of clarity, a deeper humanity that has been forged in the fire of pain. Consider a man who lost his wife after 40 years of marriage. For months he tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, insisting he was fine, refusing to speak of her name. He buried himself in work, avoided her photographs, and forced himself to hold back tears. But inside, his world grew cold and hollow. One day, during a family gathering, he suddenly broke down, sobbing uncontrollably in front of his children and grandchildren. At first he felt ashamed, but afterward something shifted. He said, "I felt her with me again, not as a ghost, but as love." The tears brought her back. By allowing his grief to surface, he released what had been suffocating him, and in doing so, he reconnected with the love that remained. Grief is not an enemy. It is a companion that demands to be acknowledged. It speaks the language of the body and the soul, not the intellect. When you try to silence it, it grows louder in the silence of your heart. But when you invite it to be felt fully, something remarkable happens. It begins to guide you. It teaches you about the depth of your love, about the fragility of existence, about the sacredness of every fleeting moment. To grieve is to honor what was lost. It is to say, "This person mattered to me so deeply that their absence carves a canyon in my soul." If it hurts profoundly, it is because you loved profoundly. Think of grief like a storm. You cannot stop the thunder, nor can you prevent the rain. If you try to ignore it, it still rages on. But if you step into it, if you let it drench you, the storm eventually passes, and the air becomes clear. There is a freshness afterward, a strange calm, even a quiet beauty. Grief works in this way. It overwhelms, it shakes you, it tears at the foundations of your being, but if you allow it to move through you, it does not destroy you. It reshapes you. The courage to feel grief is also the courage to be fully alive. Those who suppress sorrow also suppress joy, for the heart that is closed to pain cannot be fully open to love. When you numb yourself to grief, you numb yourself to life. This is why the path of healing demands that we allow grief to have its voice, To cry is not to lose strength, but to reveal it. To rage against the injustice of loss is not to be broken, but to affirm that your soul still burns with passion. To collapse into the arms of a friend and weep is not to surrender to despair, but to recognize your humanity. In many ancient cultures, grief was not hidden. It was ritualized, given form and voice. Mourners wailed aloud, families wore symbols of mourning, whole communities gathered to express collective sorrow. These practices were not primitive, they were wise. They recognized that grief is too heavy for one person to carry alone, that it requires expression, that it must be honored. Today, we often grieve in isolation, quietly, behind closed doors. But perhaps part of healing lies in reclaiming that ancient wisdom, to allow grief to be seen, heard, and shared. When you allow yourself to feel grief, you are not only releasing pain, you are keeping love alive. The ache in your chest, the tears in your eyes, the weight that bends your shoulders, these are signs of the love that remains. And though they feel unbearable at times, they are also reminders that your heart is capable of immense depth, that you have known something precious enough to mourn. In that sense, grief is not just sorrow. It is a hidden gift, a testament to the beauty of love and the resilience of the human soul. So do not fear your grief. Let it come. Let it wash over you in waves. Let it break you open, for only through that breaking can the light enter. In time the storm will calm, and though the absence will always remain, you will discover a new way of carrying it, not as a weight that crushes you, but as a depth that shapes you. When loss comes, it breaks the fabric of our lives in a way that feels unbearable. We stand among the fragments of what once was, trying to piece together a sense of order, only to discover that the old pattern no longer exists. The questions rise unbidden. Why did this happen? What meaning could there possibly be in such pain? These questions pierce us because they strike at the very heart of what it means to be human. We are creatures who yearn for order, for coherence, for a world that makes sense. But grief throws us into chaos, into a place where reason cannot comfort us, and where explanations seem shallow against the depth of suffering. Yet within these very questions lies the seed of transformation. Meaning cannot be forced, nor can it be manufactured through logic or philosophy alone. It must be discovered through experience, through the courage to dwell in the darkness until the faint light of insight begins to appear. The suffering we endure does not provide answers in the way we often hope, but it does invite us into a deeper relationship with ourselves, with life, and with the memory of the one we have lost. Some find meaning in carrying forward the dreams of those who are gone. To take up their work, to live in alignment with their values, becomes a way of ensuring that death does not mark the end of their influence. A son who grows into the virtues his father once modeled, a daughter who continues the creative work her mother began, a friend who champions the causes that once stirred the heart of their companion. These are all ways in which meaning is forged from pain. In such acts, the departed is not reduced to a memory, but is woven into the fabric of the living present. Others find meaning by offering their story as a beacon to others. A woman who lost her husband to illness once told me, "I could not save him, but I can be present for others. His death became my call to serve." She began to volunteer at a hospice, sitting quietly with those in their final days, holding hands, listening, simply being present in the way she wished someone had been for her. In the depths of her loss, she discovered a purpose that not only honored her husband's life, but also gave her own existence a new depth. The pain was not erased. She still wept. She still felt the emptiness. But through her service the pain was transformed. It became a vessel through which compassion could flow, touching the lives of others in ways she could never have imagined before her suffering. Meaning does not come to us as an intellectual conclusion. It arises as an inner realization, often quiet, sometimes fragile, but deeply alive. It is like a small flame kindled in the darkness. At first it seems insignificant against the vast night of sorrow, yet over time it grows, illuminating the path ahead. To discover meaning is not to solve the riddle of suffering, but to transmute it, to allow the wound itself to become the place where new life emerges. We might think of grief as soil turned over violently by a storm. The ground is broken, the old roots exposed, but in that very disruption the possibility for new seeds to grow appears. Many who have walked the path of loss will tell you that their pain became the place from which they learned to live more deeply, to love more fiercely, to see life with clearer eyes. They did not ask for this wisdom. It came at a terrible cost, but it became the meaning that allowed them to carry their suffering without being crushed by it. It is important to understand that meaning does not eliminate grief. The absence still aches, the memories still bring tears, the longing remains, but meaning changes the way we hold our grief. Without meaning, loss feels like a void that swallows everything, leaving us in despair. With meaning, grief becomes a thread in the larger tapestry of our existence. The pain does not vanish, but it is woven into a story that gives us strength, a story that allows us to continue forward with dignity. I once knew a man who lost his younger brother in a tragic accident. For years he carried anger, asking again and again why such a senseless event had occurred. His life became shadowed by resentment toward fate, toward God, toward the injustice of it all. Only when he began mentoring young men in his community, guiding them away from the recklessness that had taken his brother's life, did his pain begin to take on meaning. He told me, if I can save even one life, then my brother's death is not in vain. The ache of loss never left him, but it was no longer only an ache. It became a force that propelled him into purpose. His brother's absence was real, but so too was the presence of the good he was able to bring into the world. We often imagine that finding meaning in loss requires some grand gesture, some heroic act, but sometimes meaning is found in the smallest choices. It may be in the quiet ritual of lighting a candle each evening in remembrance, or in the simple decision to live each day with greater tenderness toward others. It may be found in the courage to speak of your loved one openly, refusing to let silence erase their influence. It may be found in carrying forward a piece of their character, their kindness, their humor, their patience, making it your own gift to the world. In these small acts, their life continues to ripple outward, long after their physical presence is gone. The search for meaning is not without struggle. There will be days when the pain feels meaningless, when no answer satisfies, when despair threatens to consume. This too is part of the journey. Meaning is not a fixed destination, it is a living process, one that shifts and deepens as we ourselves are transformed by grief. Some days the meaning is clear, radiant, sustaining. Other days it hides, leaving us to stumble in the dark. Yet even in the darkest moments, the very act of searching keeps the flame alive. To ask, what meaning can I create from this loss, is to affirm that your suffering does not have the final word, that even in the face of death, life insists on renewal. In this way, grief can become a teacher. It teaches us that our lives are not random, that love cannot be destroyed, that even in suffering, something valuable can emerge. It teaches us humility, reminding us that we are not in control of fate, but it also teaches us resilience, showing us that we can endure and even grow through what we once thought would break us. So when the pain of loss threatens to consume you, Remember that within the very heart of that pain lies the possibility of meaning. It will not erase your grief, nor will it restore what was lost, but it can transform the way you carry your sorrow. It can turn absence into presence, despair into compassion, emptiness into purpose. In finding meaning, the memory of your loved one does not fade into shadow. It becomes a guiding force, a light that continues to shape you long after their body is gone. When death enters our lives and takes from us someone we love, the silence it leaves can feel unbearable. The absence presses against us like a weight, and in those early days of grief it seems as though everything has been extinguished. Their laughter is no longer heard, their footsteps no longer echo in the hallways, their warmth no longer fills the spaces we once shared. It is easy to believe in that moment that the relationship has been severed forever, that all that remains is the pain of the loss. Yet this is not the full truth, for though death takes the body, it cannot take away the essence of what was given and received in love. That remains, not in the form we once knew, but in a new and enduring way that continues to live within us. Love does not end, it only changes form. The soul instinctively knows this, even if the mind struggles to accept it. The bonds of affection and memory are not undone by the absence of physical presence. They continue to reverberate in the choices we make, the values we carry, the gestures and words that have been woven into our being through years of connection. To stay connected to a loved one after death is not an act of denial. It is an act of recognition. It is the acknowledgement that the depth of love cannot be undone by mortality, and that the one we mourn still walks with us, though in a subtler, quieter way. There was a man who lost his father when he was still a young adult, just beginning to shoulder the responsibilities of life. In moments of doubt and struggle, he would pause and ask himself, "What would Dad say here?" And in the stillness of that reflection, he would hear the echo of his father's wisdom, phrases he had heard 1,000 times, advice that was once spoken across the dinner table, lessons that had been impressed upon him through actions more than words. Though his father was gone, the bond remained as a living presence in his decisions, guiding him toward integrity and courage. He later shared that he never truly felt abandoned, because his father's influence had become part of his inner compass. Death had changed the form of the relationship, but it had not destroyed it. This is one of the most profound truths we can discover when coping with grief. The love we shared remains alive within us. It is inscribed into the very fabric of our souls, woven into our identity in ways that time cannot unravel. Each memory, each lesson, each shared moment becomes part of the architecture of who we are. When we allow ourselves to remain open to this presence, grief is no longer only about absence. It becomes also about connection, about continuing to carry the essence of the one we lost into the unfolding story of our lives. Rituals can help to anchor this connection. They provide a space for the invisible bond to become tangible. Lighting a candle on their birthday, for instance, transforms a day that might otherwise feel empty into a moment of communion. Visiting a place they loved allows us to feel their spirit linger in the atmosphere of that location. Writing letters in a journal addressed to them can give voice to thoughts and feelings that still long to be shared. These rituals do not deny the reality of death. Rather, they honor the reality of love. They remind us that the relationship is not erased. It has simply moved into a different dimension, one where the heart and soul serve as the meeting place. Some people fear that to continue these connections is unhealthy, that it keeps them from moving on. But moving on does not mean leaving behind. It means moving forward with what remains. To stay connected to love is not to cling to the past in denial, but but to carry it into the present with reverence. Think of how we carry the legacy of our ancestors, many of whom we never even met. Their blood, their struggles, their dreams live within us. If this is true of those we did not know, how much more true it is of those we loved deeply, who shaped us directly with their presence. The imprint of their being cannot be erased. There is a sacredness in this continuation. Love is not bound by time. A mother who has lost her child still feels the bond, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in fleeting moments of intuition, sometimes in the quiet sense that the child remains near. A husband who has lost his wife might hear her laughter in his memory when he walks into a place they once enjoyed together. These are not mere tricks of imagination. They are the psyche's way of reminding us that love is eternal, that its energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. I once knew a woman who lost her sister unexpectedly. The two had shared an unbreakable closeness, and her grief was devastating. For months she felt adrift, unable to imagine life without her. Then one day she decided to take up painting, something her sister had always dreamed of but never pursued. Each brushstroke became a prayer, a conversation with her sister, a way of keeping her alive in the world. Over time, the act of painting became a ritual of love, transforming her grief into creativity. She told me, "When I paint, I feel her with me. It's as if we're creating together." The connection had not been broken, it had simply changed its language. Staying connected to the love rather than only to the loss reshapes the experience of grief. Loss will always be present. There is no erasing the finality of death. But when we focus only on the absence, we live in despair. When we also recognize the love that endures, grief becomes infused with meaning. We begin to see the departed not as vanished into nothingness, but as living within us, as continuing to shape who we are and who we are becoming. In time, this connection becomes a source of strength. It allows us to move forward not with a sense of betrayal, but with a sense of continuity. We no longer carry the memory as a wound alone, but as a guiding presence. We ask ourselves, how can I live in a way that honors the love we shared? How can I embody what they taught me? In answering these questions, the relationship becomes part of our growth. The departed lives on not as a shadow that haunts us, but as a light that illuminates our path. Love leaves an imprint on the soul that nothing can erase, not time, not distance, not even death. To stay connected to that love is to allow grief to soften into reverence, absence to transform into presence, sorrow to open into gratitude. Though the form has changed, the bond remains, shaping us, guiding us, reminding us that love is the one force that death cannot conquer. Grief is a valley, dark and shadowed, and to walk through it is to feel at times as though one's very breath has been stolen. Yet this valley is not meant to be our permanent dwelling. To stand still too long in its depths is to allow sorrow to consume the vitality that still remains within us. Loss will always change us, but it need not imprison us. To honor the memory of those we have loved and lost is not only to weep for them, but to continue living in such a way that their influence does not fade into silence, but echoes in the unfolding of our lives. This is not betrayal, though many fear it might be. There is a whisper inside the grieving heart that says, if I smile again, if I find joy, if I dare to move forward, am I leaving them behind? But love is never diminished by joy. It is magnified by it. To live fully after loss is to say, because of your love, I will not waste my days. Because of your presence in my life, I will live in a way that reflects what you gave me. Growth is not abandonment. It is the continuation of the story. I once spoke with a man who had lost his wife of 40 years. For months he could not bear to step outside the home they had built together. Every corner of the house reminded him of her absence. Every sound echoed with the silence of her voice. But one morning, after a long winter of grief, he stepped into the garden they had planted side by side. He saw the flowers budding in spring, life insisting upon itself despite the cold he carried in his chest. Slowly he began tending the garden again. In the act of nurturing those plants, he realized he was also nurturing the bond he still carried with her. He told me later she loved beauty and growth. I thought I had to keep still to honor her, but it was when I began to grow again that I felt her presence most. This is the paradox of grief. We think holding tightly to pain is loyalty, but true loyalty is transformation. It is to ask ourselves how we can embody the best of what they gave us. If your loved one taught you kindness, then each act of compassion you show becomes a thread in their legacy. If they taught you resilience, then each challenge you overcome becomes a testament to their influence. Their death does not erase their teaching, it calls upon you to live it more consciously. Psychologists and spiritual thinkers alike have spoken of post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where suffering, though devastating, becomes the catalyst for a deeper, more authentic life. We see this not only in individuals but across humanity. After wars, communities rebuild with stronger bonds. After disasters, people discover a generosity they never knew they possessed. In the same way, personal grief can uncover in us a depth of strength and empathy we might never have discovered otherwise. Pain carves into us, but it carves space for wisdom and compassion that could not have existed without it. Consider the words of Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of the Holocaust and yet emerged with the profound insight that the human spirit can endure any suffering if it discovers meaning and purpose. He observed that even in the camps, those who could hold on to love, whether for a person, a vision, or a belief, were able to transcend the brutality of their circumstances. This does not make the suffering less real, nor the loss less painful, but it reveals that in the crucible of grief, we are given the chance to choose whether to wither or to deepen. One woman who lost her only son in a tragic accident later devoted her life to mentoring young men in her community who lacked parental guidance. She said, "I could not save my child, but I can pour into others what I poured into him." Her grief never disappeared, but it was transmuted into a force of life that gave her days meaning and gave others hope. In choosing growth, she honored her son's memory in a way that mourning alone could not. To choose growth beyond grief is also to reclaim our own existence. The one we lost would not want us to shrink into shadows. They would want us to live. Imagine them standing before you, speaking the words they could not leave behind. Do not waste your breath, your strength, your chance at life. Carry me with you, but do not stop living because I am gone. To step into the light again is not to say the loss does not matter. It is to say their love mattered so deeply that you will not let it end with their absence. Grief is like a river. At first, its currents pull us under, and we are certain we will drown. But with time, if we allow ourselves to move with it, the river carries us forward. We emerge changed, but still alive, still capable of love, still capable of giving. This is the gift hidden within the pain. That the very love which brought us sorrow is also the force that can bring us renewal. When you channel grief into growth, you transform not only your own life but the lives around you. Your resilience becomes a mirror in which others see their own strength. Your compassion becomes a balm to wounds you may never even know exist. And in this way, the person you lost continues to live. Through you, through your actions, through the legacy you weave out of both pain and love. So, do not see grief as a place to remain forever, but as a passage. Let it teach you, shape you, deepen you. And then, when you are ready, let it guide you toward a fuller embrace of life. The valley is dark, yes, but beyond it the horizon waits. And as you walk forward, step by step, you carry with you not only the sorrow of what has ended, but the radiance of a love that has no end. The loss of a loved one is never something we get over. It becomes part of us, reshaping the way we see the world and ourselves. But through acceptance, emotional honesty, meaning, making connection and growth, we learn not just to survive grief, but to let it carve new depths in our soul, depths from which greater wisdom, love, and strength can emerge. Your loved one is gone, but they are not lost. They live in your heart, in your choices, in your courage to keep walking. And as you walk, carrying both grief and love, you are never truly alone.